Welcome to another episode of Let's Go There, the podcast by the New Testament Church of God Women's Discipleship Ministries. Our podcast features a range of individuals providing spiritual insight, empowering advice, and biblical principles for everyday challenges. You were made to live the free life in Christ. We hope you enjoy this episode.
This is session number 3, and I'm Delroy Hall, a trained counsellor, psychotherapist, also a teacher and trainer. Session 2, we looked at giving ourselves the permission to feel and writing unsent letters to work on difficult emotions that we may have some difficulty talking about. One of the things I mentioned in the first session was that when we have these major events in our lives, it affects our humanity. And it's a very narrow view to think of purely emotions and our minds. Recently, I heard on Radio 4 that psychologists were going to do a research on the impact of COVID-19 on NHS staff, and they want to look at the emotions and the psychological well-being. And I remember saying to the friends, too narrow. It's too narrow because this has affected people's entire humanity. And you may remember from the very first session, I spoke about bio, psychosocial, spiritual, and sexual. And now I'm going to explain a little bit more what that means. Bio is the body. And we know now that when things happen to us, trauma, excitement, the body releases hormones. I'm not an endocrinologist, but the body releases hormones to look after ourselves and so forth and so forth. So what the hormones do, they affect our muscles, they affect our organs, and they affect our whole being. So that's the body. Psychosocial, we know already, in terms of our mind, our emotions, relationships, in terms of what can happen sometimes, people withdraw, but I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. Spiritual, not necessarily whether people believe in God or not. For some people of faith, when there's a huge loss, there can be periods of major doubt. And what you have to do, don't tell people they shouldn't think or feel that way, because what that does, it closes people down and they start to feel guilty. What I've known over 30 years of working with people, black, white, Asian, which I have done, if you give them the space to talk, people of faith, if you give them the space to talk, their relationship with God quite often is stronger than it was before. But if people say they doubt God, why has he done this? Give them the space to talk. It is absolutely important that you do that. Don't close them down. Spiritual is, what does this mean? Because one of the things that we want when things happen, why does this happen? What does all this mean? You remember from the first session with Kubler-Ross, her 5 stages have developed now to a 6th stage where people are talking about what does all this mean? Now you might be thinking, well, what on earth has this got to do with sex? Well, sex is more than just intercourse. But let's just imagine this scenario. There's a couple, husband and wife, and intimacy has been really good. The sexual union has been really good. And one of the parents dies. You're close to your parent and the death has been sudden. This is what happens. Now, let's say it's the man. The man has lost his father or his mother. And what he does, he withdraws. That's how he deals with stress and sadness and loss. His wife, on the other hand, when she has stress and loss and difficult things, what she wants is intimacy and closeness, not necessarily sex, but she wants the closeness. So you can see what happens in a relationship, that one withdraws to deal with it. The other one uses sex as a way to deal with anxiety and difficult situations. One withdraws, the other one wants it. And what can happen that can lead to illicit relationships, people spending inordinate amounts of time on the internet looking at porn. It can raise a whole range of things. And I'm talking to a Christian audience, and I am convinced, being a pastor for 30 years, we are a microcosm of what's happening out in the world. Everything I see happening out in the world, I believe it happens in the church, whether it's New Testament Church of God of Prophecy, the Church of England, Roman Catholic Church, the Methodist Church, the Baptist Church. We are human, and we find ways to wrestle with difficult emotions and so forth. So, biopsychosocial, spiritual, and sexual. The next thing that can be explored even more, and I think I'll just say that the whole thing about the sexual realm quite often is something that an intimacy and closeness is something that we don't deal very well with within the church. But if we want to know about intimacy, closeness, and the sexual attraction between a man and a woman, check out the Song of Solomon. That is a book that talks about human sexuality and its heterosexuality between a man and a woman. Another thing that we can do is to journal positive experiences. Now, I've got to say right up front, I am a journaler. This is my conscious bias. I've been a journaler since 1999. I've got all my journals. I've got a massive box full of all my journals. I think I started January 1999, and I used it because when I was pastoring, there was lots of stuff going on in the church, and I couldn't understand what was taking place. And I didn't really know, and I didn't know at the time, I was using the process of journaling to help me understand what was going on. But what happened, it really helped me to become a much better pastor. It wasn't the master's or the PhD. It was daily reflecting on the rawness and the day-to-day experience of pastoral work that really helped me to develop. So what is journaling? Journaling had its roots in Japan from the 10th century, where the geisha girls used to have their kind of dalliances with men, and they would write little secrets, and then they would write in a book and then keep it under their pillow. Journaling is not keeping a diary. Diary is appointments and times. A journal is where you write about your experience, what has happened, what's taken place. Really, really important. There's lots of research that's been done on writing and our mental well-being. So this is what we know. People who write recover quicker when they've had an operation. People who write or journal have less IBS or irritable bowel syndrome. They have less symptoms. What we also know, if people write or journal regularly, so you talk about your experiences, you write about those unpleasant emotions, what we know is this: writing lowers blood pressure, lowers levels of anxiety, boosts the immune system, and really helps us to kind of get some clarity in terms of moving forward. So journaling is absolutely indispensable for working through difficult emotions. I used it about 8 or 9 years ago. There's a relationship that I was in, and it had to end for a whole variety of reasons. And I used the process, and this is what I said to myself: any difficult emotion that surfaces as I'm writing, I'm not going to sweep it under the carpet, but I'm going to look at it, I'm going to write about it, and then that will be it. And normally I'm the type of person, when I'm hurt for a very, very long time. But the process of writing, journaling, really helped me to deal with those those unpleasant and very, very difficult emotions. So journaling is incredibly important. I can't emphasize that enough. And for those of you who may suffer with dyslexia, what you can do, journals don't have to be just handwritten. Mine are. And I was working with somebody some time ago who had really bad dyslexia, but he wanted to keep a journal. So what he did, he wrote some words, but he used art. He was very creative. And he brought in his journal. Inside the journal were words taken out of a magazine and some images that he drew. And as he started to talk to me about what he got in the journal, it told his story, even though he suffered with dyslexia. So journaling is incredibly important. The book I might suggest you read as a starting point is Journal to the Self by Kathleen Adams. Journal to the Self by Kathleen Adams. What I will say as I finish this session, for many of us in church, we have this view that things out in the world have no benefit or bearing on us as believers. That is a very narrow view of the world. Not every unchurched people are bad. There's lots of good things out there that we can use to develop ourselves and to work through the issues of loss, grief and bereavement. And I'd really encourage you to have a good go. That's the end of session 3, and we're going to go on to the final session. See you in a while.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. We hope you found it inspiring and insightful. Stay tuned for our next episode. Subscribe and tell a friend. For more information about our ministry, please visit www.ntcg.org.uk/WDM. Thank you.